a lady named Mattie Gundry. Her initials are reversed, M and G. So if she's chosen, Dr. Noonan's going to have to supervise the crane to make sure they put them in the right order. But she's really a serious candidate for the name. Listen to this. So according to the Women's History Committee, Mattie Gundry was a nationally known educator with a focus on special needs children. This was in the 1910s. She ran the Virginia Training School, which was around where Harris Teeter is now, and a sanatorium in Falls Church over on Little Falls. She ran and was elected to the Falls Church City Town Council 1 year after women were granted the right to vote, coming up on our 100th anniversary of that. She was also the director of the Falls Church Bank, and she was an artist and an architect. If there's a person who epitomizes Falls Church City now, it would still be Mattie Gundry. Can you see her running a bank for a day job, overseeing a school, sitting on the dais, making law, dabbling in art and architecture? She actually sounds like several Falls churches we know today. So, board members, it's time to find a new name for our high school and our new building. Someone who deserves to have their initials worn proudly on our banners and uniforms. Someone we can be proud of. Please make this happen. Thank you. Oh, and if you want, this is from the women's site. You can read about Mattie Gundry.
Thank you, Dr. Thies.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is we have a closed meeting. Oh, do we have any other speakers? No. Next on our agenda is a closed meeting. It will be a very brief closed meeting. Someone please read us into closed.
First of all, do we need to move to go into?
Oh, sorry. Yes. Would someone please move for us to go into closed meeting? Great. Thank you, Mr. Castillo. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Someone please read us into closed.
Madam Chair, pursuant to the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, I move that the board convene a closed meeting for the following purpose: to discuss or consider the identified subject matter, personnel under section 2.2-3711A1. In particular, pursuant to the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, I move that the board convene a closed meeting for the following purpose: to discuss or consider the identified subject matter, personnel under 2.2-3711A1. Feeling a sense of deja vu. In particular, staff appointments, staff reassignments, staff resignations, staff retirements, staff performance, staff termination, staff change in position, dependent care leave, long-term medical leave, child care leave request, and advisory committee appointments and reappointments.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Litton.
Yes, Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Castillo?
Aye.
Ms. Gill?
Aye.
Ms. Litton? Aye. And Ms. Russell? Aye. And Mr. Webb?
Aye.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Please move to reconvene to open meeting. Thank you, Mr. Castillo. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Would someone please certify the closed meeting?
Whereas the Falls Church City School Board has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3711B of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this school board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the Falls Church City School Board hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, 1, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification applies, and 2, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Webb.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Castillo?
Aye.
Ms. Gill?
Aye.
Ms. Litton? Aye. Ms. Russell?
Yes.
And Mr. Webb?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have no recognitions and reports tonight. We'll move on to our consent agenda, and I think Ms. Minson has a brief statement before we do that.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Gill. One of the items on consent is the removal of policy 8.21, workers' compensation. I've worked with Ms. Michael and Ms. Hall on this. Right now, we currently have a policy 8.21 covering workers' compensation, and there's no model policy from the VSBA on this. We looked at other local divisions, and many of them have workers' compensation reflected either not at all, and they follow the Virginia Workers' Compensation Committee, or more, or Virginia Workers' Compensation Act, or a regulation. So there's guidance provided to staff members, but still pointing towards the Virginia Workers' Compensation Act as the controlling law. So working with Ms. Hall, we have put together a regulation. It's actually up on the website now under GF-R. As a regulation, it wouldn't require board review or approval or consent, but upon the removal of the policy, if the board is so inclined, as part of the consent agenda, then that regulation GFR would be in its place. And tomorrow I'll work with Mr. Brett to remove policy 8.21 from the website.
Are there any questions on that? Again, it's a mechanical, there's no change to our policy or how we conduct anything.
That's correct.
Seeing no questions or comments, I would seek unanimous consent to approve the consent agenda as presented. Great. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Minson. We'll move on to section 8.01, our 2020 legislative package, and we have Ms. Lila Wise in the audience as well, and I'll turn it over to her and Shannon Litton.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Lila. We're always glad to have you here to answer all our questions and help us with this. Lila helped put together what we sent out this week, so I'm hoping everybody had a chance to take a look at it. I know there are a couple, Justin had mentioned wanting to add something about teacher pay, which I thought we had some language last year that we could potentially add back in. Peter, I know you just handed something. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I apologize for the last minute
No,
on
it's
that.
fine.
So one of the things that sort of came to mind as I was thinking after last Tuesday's sort of shift in the way the legislature looks in the state of Virginia was knowing, and maybe it has nothing to do with it, maybe it does, I don't know, but knowing that we're building a new high school that is going to be net zero ready and hopefully net zero, and looking at going out for a power purchase agreement, one of the things that I thought would be useful for us to have in our legislative package would be something that would allow us to sort of allow us to go out and get the solar power necessary to be able to gain ground on the net zero. So I reached out to Tim Stevens here in the city that I think everybody knows, who's been instrumental in a lot of the work around sustainability. And I'm just going to kind of paraphrase what he said back to me. And the first is that he said that he would recommend the school board supporting some sort of process that supports the bill that has been commonly referred to as solar freedom here in the state, the Commonwealth of Virginia, which would relax a number of the constraints that affect rooftop solar. As it relates to our high school, it would eliminate the limit of 50 megawatts, which currently applies to power purchase agreements that are net metered, which is the kind of connection that we're going to get at our high school, which means that we're metered along with Fairfax, along with Loudoun, and along with others. And as Fairfax and Loudoun and others sort of up their game with respect to power purchase agreements, it would substantively limit our ability to get to that 50 megawatt limit, because there is a 50 megawatt limit. So if they, for example, if they were to, get 49 megawatts, it would leave 1 megawatt for us to be able to utilize. And ultimately, we don't want to have that limit. So last year, the City Council included in their legislative package some language that supported solar freedom. So what I've shared with you tonight is something that Lilith has worked on, and I think it mirrors pretty closely to what the City Council did last year. And I'll just read, and it says, the City of Falls Church City Public Schools supports legislation to remove barriers and allow for the creation of stronger markets for distributed solar goals to include the following components. 1, lifting the 1% cap of the total amount of solar that can be net metered in a utility territory to 5%. And the second is that allows local government entities to install solar facilities of up to 5 megawatts on each government-owned property and use the electricity for schools and other government-owned buildings located nearby, even if not contiguous, which also opens up the possibility of us potentially utilizing the economic development site for additional solar power that could come to our site. Right now, as you may recall in part of our conversations, it had to be the same address. It had to come from the same address. This sort of widens the net a little bit and allows us to get more opportunity to gain some power through a power purchase agreement. So anyway, I know that Senator Saslaw is familiar with this, this solar freedom bill. We would also talk with Marcus Simon about the solar freedom bill and supporting it. But I think it would be very advantageous to the school system, considering we're building a high school that's going to have a lot of PV arrays on the top, to be able to leverage our opportunity in the legislature. So that's kind of where I was coming from when I suggested adding it.
Great. Sounds good. Willa, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to comment on.
On this?
Or just in general.
Oh, sure, because I'd like to go through the package with you.
Sure, that'd be great.
When I was driving here tonight, I was thinking, I'd been here with the Falls Church School Board for probably 25, 26 years. And this is the happiest that I've been at the beginning of a General Assembly session. For the first time, we are not talking about a Labor Day bill. We know we can open school when we want to. With the election, things are going to be very different. And especially as Peter says, you know, Senator Saslaw, other than the governor, is going to be the most powerful man in Richmond. And he's your senator. So that's going to be a big asset for us. Now, with this, what Peter was just talking about, I've talked to my colleagues in Falls Church and in Arlington, and everybody is on target with this kind of language. Although Fairfax would prefer that we lift the 1% cap and not have a cap at all. And that may be what they're going to work toward. But the other thing that's going to happen, which is fascinating to me, is up until this year, Dominion pretty much decided what was going to happen with solar, and they had delegates and senators who voted for them. However, you've got a new group of younger people in the General Assembly, especially in the House, who did not take Dominion money. And that was one of their campaign promises. We are not going to take campaign donations from Dominion. And so I think we're going to see a whole change in this happening this year. So this was a great year to have this kind of position. Now let me just go through a few things, because you've got some things you haven't seen here before. Many of them are Peter's initiative, so I won't go through all the rest of them.
Only if you like them.
They're gonna love them. The addition of funding for cybersecurity and physical security initiatives. We've not had that before, and none of my colleagues, as far as I know, have that in their legislative package. And so we're going to have to flesh that out a little bit more in terms of what we're talking about, and as we get involved with the whole budget process. And the other one, this is one everybody loves, and that opposes any increase in VRS rates and supports the use of state surplus funds to expand the funded status of its pension funds. This is a Falls Church initiative. Nobody's got this in their legislative package at this point. But once they start looking at it, they're going to go, wow, you know, that's really a cool idea. But there is a lot of people are out there looking for the surplus funds. So we'll see. But this would be a biggie both for the state budget, because, you know, the VRS rates going up for them cost the state a lot of money, in addition to localities. Now, some new things in the issues, and we do have 3 or 4 new ones. The first one is allow school divisions to use performance-based assessments for all end-of-course standards of learning assessments. And you might think, well, this is just common sense, isn't it? However, we had one